Well, I'm joined now from Tel Aviv by Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, a spokesman for the Israel Defense Forces. Lieutenant Colonel, when you see women and children lying slain in the streets, what goes through your mind?
Well, clearly there are harsh visuals, and it is a human tragedy. It is an unfortunate situation that has been brought upon us by this terrorist organization, Islamist, which has made over the years a multi-tiered plan of action, which includes building rockets, building a network of tunnels, building concealed rocket launchers, all within the civilian population. And part of this multi-tiered plan of action is the civilian population of Gaza.
Well, you blame Hamas, though, but you blame, sorry to interrupt you, you blame Hamas, but they're your shells that are killing these people.
Over the last 13 days, we have had several attempts to carry out ceasefires. The first one, it was us, Israel, appealing to Hamas, please let's have calm, meet calm with calm. Then we had an Egyptian brokered agreement to try and de-escalate the situation, to have a ceasefire. We held our fire, we stopped the attacks, we stopped our Air Force, the most unnatural thing to do for a military when you are under attack. And what did Hamas do? They continued with more aggression, with over 50 rockets within 6 hours. 50 rockets from Haifa in the north to Beersheba in the south. 75% of the state of Israel under threat from this terrorist organization being held hostage. It's an unbearable reality.
And then you met that force with an incredible...
We had a humanitarian hiatus.
Sorry to interrupt, but you also met that force with an incredible force. So 40% of fatalities are children, women and the elderly, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. The UN says children are a fifth of those killed.
We continued, according to a request from the United Nations, to have a humanitarian hiatus. We agreed to that as well, and we ceased our operations. Every time we have ceased our operations, we have been met with more aggression from this terrorist organization that has no regard for human life, Israeli or Palestinian. If there are two sides to this conflict, Hamas and Israel, and I would say there is only one that actually cares anything about the Palestinian population, and it isn't Hamas. We are fighting a terrorist organization that is operating in order to kill Israelis, to launch indiscriminate rocket attacks against the civilian state of Israel. They have built a huge network of Lower Gaza. Beneath the surface of Gaza, there is a whole new town going from north to south with tunnels that infiltrate the state of Israel for one purpose in mind: death, destruction and carnage to the state of Israel. It's an unbearable reality, something we cannot put up with. Every time we have reached out with a hand saying, let's try and calm the situation down, they have met it with more violence.
You're talking about death and destruction. You're talking about death and destruction there. Can I ask you, are you using flechette shells which release thousands of lethal metal darts when they go off?
The IDF uses munitions which are in line with international humanitarian law. Within the laws of armed conflict, we are utilizing, we have used flechette over the recent days in the scenario and in accordance to our rules and regulations, which are in line with international standards.
But of course, they may be legal, but it also increases the risk of wounding and maiming civilians, doesn't it?
As I said, the situation on the ground is as such where these, in the reports that we were receiving today, out of Shujaiya, where Jonathan Miller was reporting, we've had reports of the terrorists dressed as women, trying to reposition themselves during the ceasefire that, again, we upheld to. So this is the type of people we're up against. They have no regard for human life whatsoever. They are operating, they are utilizing every international symbol, every attempt to try and kill Israelis in a reality which is just not acceptable.
And your response before you go to the 13...
I'm sure you're not implying that that Israel should not cease to defend its civilians because a terrorist organization is hiding behind its own.
And your response to the news of the death of 13 Israeli soldiers?
The IDF is a military force. When we go into combat, this is an unfortunate outcome. It can happen. You know, we have to operate. We have been ordered to operate by our government, and we are here to defend the State of Israel. The soldiers go forward so that our civilians do not have to live in that threat of indiscriminate rocket fire and tunnels which have only one intention, to kill Israelis.
Okay, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, thank you very much for joining me. And we will continue to follow the latest developments in Gaza on our live blog, which is on our website, channel4.com/news.